First of all, thank you, Zubin sir, for joining this chat with Indulge. We're all looking forward to Indus Creed coming together in the Independence Rock Festival. We're all very excited. And of course, this is a sort of preview interview where we're trying to get to know what's in store from you and the band, and what can we expect from from the set list and everything. So, thank you so much for taking time and joining this conversation.
Sure, man. Pleasure to be here.
Right. So, my first question for you is that it's been a little while since the band last got together and performed. It's been quite a few months. So, leading up to the day, it's a quite an iconic stage. So, how do you look forward to, as the member of the band, and also the band in general? How are they looking forward to this particular stage? And this time, how are the rehearsal sessions and jamming sessions looking like as well?
So, well, it's a big day. 30 years is not
Of
something
course.
that comes
Yeah.
very often.
Yeah.
So, the idea here, I think, and it was suggested by the team at Mahindra iRock, was to actually this time invite a couple of guests to play along with us, do our songs
Right.
with a couple of guests. So to make it that little extra special, uh, what would you say, like a collective, like a cohesive event
Right.
that would
Mm.
get musicians, and particularly in the last few years, Mahesh, Uday, and myself have been focusing on trying to play with a lot of next gen musicians, younger
Right.
musicians,
Mm.
because we love their vibe, we love the spirit, and they bring in something obviously that's totally different from what we have to add to the picture.
Right.
So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. There are three or four guests who are going to be playing with us. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the rehearsals will be slotted, I think, 2, 3 days before the
Mm-hmm.
event itself. But of course, the preparatory work is already on, and
Awesome.
songs
Yeah.
are flying back and forth over the
Right. Right.
net and stuff like that. And so we're pretty
Right.
excited.
Great. So, you discussed the 30 years, right? And of course, the theme this year is 30-30. So, how do you, as Indus Creed, look at this particular, theme, and how are you to sort of channeling it through your performance in this edition?
See, we've played almost, I think, out of 30 episodes of iRock, we've probably played almost 25 or 26 of them
Yeah.
anyways, right?
Mm.
Including the one last year when it made it back
Mm-hmm.
after so many years. And the driving force behind this show, I'm sure you guys know, is Mr. Farhad Wadia, who's been an old, and very dear friend of mine, as well as the band's.
Mm.
Young 19, 20-year-olds, we used to hang out at his house, listening to music, playing music, living the whole rock and roll dream of the 80s and 90s.
Mm.
So he's such an amazingly committed guy, and he's kept this thing alive. And now with the participation of the entire Mahindra iRock team, it's taken on a new dimension, and
Okay.
it's really sort of, how should I say it, blossomed in the partnership between the two.
Right.
And yeah, so the first, I'm not sure if you really know what the history behind the event is. So there's a Xavier's festival called Malhar, right? And that
Yeah.
I think it still happens. But in our time, it was usually 14, 15, 16, 15, 16, 17, something like that of August.
Right.
And I think Farad figured out very smartly, or somebody figured out very smartly, that Malhar ends at 6 o'clock, and it's right next to Rang Bhavan where all the concerts happened in those days.
Okay.
So you had this, 5 or 6 thousand bunch of teenagers from various colleges with nothing to do. They'd been partying the whole day at the festival. And at 6 o'clock, they trooped out of the gates. And what better way to finish your evening by going and watching a rock gig right next door? So it was a kind of captive audience. You couldn't go wrong. Whoever you put on, there was always three,
Right.
4,000 crazy young kids there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, invariably, it would rain at that time, and that made it even more sort of exciting for uh,
Right.
all the kids and all. So yeah, it was a great time in those days. And Rambhavan, sadly, then many years later, shut down for various political
Mhm.
reasons. But Farad pushed through. He moved the whole venue to somewhere in Andheri. I forget the name of the grounds. So for a couple of years, it was held there. Then he moved abroad, so it stopped for a few years. But now it's back. And we're happy to be a part.
Great. You were discussing something around the sort of playlist that will be there for the fest. So if you could walk us through it and how it's going to look like, and is it going to be a mix of old and new, like how the theme is, and like just
Oh
walk us
yeah,
through.
so it's a whole mixed bag, you know. So basically,
Yeah,
Indus Creed was formerly Rock Machine. So
of
a lot
course.
of the
Yeah.
tunes from the first album went under the band name as Rock Machine. The
Mm,
newer ones came out as Indus Creed. So
yeah.
we like to do a little bit of both sides, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge audience that loves the old tunes too. There's a
Of
younger
course. Yeah.
crowd that loves the newer sound. And
Mm.
yeah, with the addition of the guests, so we'll throw in a couple of cover tunes as well, you know, popular tunes.
Okay. Okay.
Basically, we can review it. So we don't like doing cover tunes exactly the way they are.
Mm.
We obviously want to reinterpret them, give them a fresh lease of life, something. So we'll twist a few, maybe a few covers around, get the guests to sing.
Mm.
Some will sing originals, mix and
Right.
match.
Okay. With the definition of rock sort of changing in the last few decades, I would want to know, as a band and as a musician yourself, I would want to know how much of the definition would you say has sort of changed or evolved of rock as a genre, and now that the band has sort of adopted the identity of Indus Creed, and it's been almost over a decade. How have you as a band member and the band as a whole sort of looked at this definition?
Well, first, let me say one thing. Without evolution, there is really no music. You know, music is
Okay.
just a constant, for me
Mm-hmm.
at least, it's a constant form of evolving whatever
Mm-hmm.
genre it may be. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at rock in the 60s or even 50s, 60s, it was very different from what became the
Mm-hmm.
70s, became different in the 80s, 90s, and going forward. So, in that sense, even if you look at the four albums we've released, they're actually very, very different from each other.
Of
So, I
course.
would say the first album, Rock and Roll Renegade, had a very sort of raw, sort of very raw rock kind of sound to it.
Mm-hmm.
The one Second Coming became slightly more polished. It had a more 90s kind of rock sound.
Mm-hmm.
The quality of recording, I think, was better, and the sounds were sort of the songs were sort of how should I say, very consciously crafted in a certain way to make
Okay.
the sound
Right.
really polished, etc.
Mm-hmm.
The third album was a kind of rebound in that sense because by then we had sort of Pretty Child under our belt, which had done very well for us. The video was ranked ninth best video in the world, and number one was Michael Jackson, number two was Madonna,
Right.
three was Sting. So to be number nine
Yeah.
in that company was really good. So
Yeah.
it kind of also gave us an idea that the whole thing of using a little bit of Indian instruments in the music could really make it sound quite interesting. So we did a little
Of
bit of
course. Yeah.
experimentation, and we had a
Mm-hmm.
manager back then, Russell, who firmly believed that the influence of Indian sounds in our music would help us also not sound typically sort of American or European or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we did some experimentation there, and the third album was very different, and it had basuri, it had sarangi.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pretty Child was released again, so it had saxophone, and so there were some elements that were not sort of typical of the first two albums. The first two albums were
Mm-hmm.
pure kind of rock and roll, hard rock, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a sense of evolution there, and then of course we took a break for 10 years, and we came back with Evolve, I think in 2012, 2013.
Right.
Had a completely different sound altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in a way quite happy to see that the music and the legacy is evolving constantly. And
Mm-hmm.
we're very lazy writers, songwriters, so we haven't released anything in the past few years. But when we do, I'm sure it'll be the next step of evolution as it should be.
Right. You were talking about the blending of genres right now. How the sort of Indian sound is also being adapted into how rock is being looked at, and a lot of bands, especially new acts, are they're sort of keeping that as the base of their music and sort of growing from there. So I get from what you're saying that you welcome this change, but I would want to know. What is how do you see this growing, because you've seen the sort of growth of rock in the last 30 years in the country and beyond, but how would you see say that how it's evolving, and how do you see it sort of growing in the country, and how people are adopting it to their blood of sorts? So how would you see, what do you say to that?
Okay, so the first and foremost and most important thing, and
Hmm.
which I like to feel that we had a small role to play in, is that today younger bands are playing their own music, which they should.
Hmm.
There are very few bands playing any cover material.
Hmm. Hmm, hmm.
Best part of it is that Indian audiences are totally accepting that. You see,
Right.
if you look back the 80s, 90s, most I mean even 70s, bands in India
Hmm.
hardly ever played their own material.
Right, right, right.
They were all the bands were cover bands and everybody came to hear
Hmm.
them. But you've also got to understand in that now today, if you take a band like Deep Purple, huge, big legacy British rock
Hmm.
band, I think they've been to India probably 4 or 5 times.
Hmm.
Brian Adams has probably come 7 or 8 times. I mean, Sting
Yeah.
has come 3, 4 times. So India is now on the international map. Ed Sheeran played a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
Who else? I
Hmm.
mean, every big star. Coldplay is around the corner.
Cool. Yeah.
So India's on the international map for all these mega, big, huge artists. They want to
Hmm.
come here, they want to play. So
Hmm.
if you're going to see Coldplay play, I mean, why the hell would you want an Indian band? Why would you go to watch an Indian band play Coldplay material? You don't want it. But that never happened in the 80s and 70s, 80s, 90s, right? India was not on the map. No international band ever came here. I mean, from what I can remember, in the 80s, there was probably Europe, the Swedish rock band that came in
Hmm.
88. There was Bon Jovi that came early 90s, maybe,
Hmm.
Bon Jovi was through Farad, Europe, I don't know who brought them down, whatever. So the point is that the audience here that was thirsting for Western rock, Indian bands became like a conduit, So
Hmm.
Indian band played Doors, Deep,
Hmm.
whatever, and people loved it. But the audiences were not receptive to original material.
Of
But
course, yeah.
happily, that has changed completely now. And, practically every band is playing its own material. And that's the way it
Hmm.
should be because that's the
Right,
way you can really progress is to have your own
right.
voice. Okay, so that's one. The second thing is that I think when you're experimenting with music, you have to find your own sound and it has to be an honest sound. So if you're going to try and infuse elements that are not really part of your DNA or your character, I don't think it's going to work and it's going to show. But if you feel it, if you feel that this instrument or this line will work in another language or whatever it is,
Hmm.
and it's legitimately honest and puts it, then the audience, I think you give it a good chance for the audience to appreciate it. Yeah, some will like it, some won't, whatever. But I would really encourage bands to do that. In fact, I would really
Right,
encourage bands to sing in the language that they're most comfortable in. So
right, right.
if you're comfortable singing in Tamil, you should really do it
Hmm.
because for starters, there will be a deeper sense of conviction from what you're singing. And I think
Sure.
you open yourself up to a far bigger audience.
Hmm.
Restricting yourself to just singing only in English, you're always going to be
Hmm.
restricted. Yeah, okay. Having said that, English is a universal language, and possibly if you keep singing in Tamil, it's going to be tough for you to break out of India. So you got to figure that one out on your own. But the basic thing is just be honest with your music and be honest with what you want to do. If you start just following trends for the heck of doing that, I don't think it really comes across in an honest way.
Right, right. So you're very perceptive of how different bands and different artists are sort of adapting music also, and to their own identity of sorts. So uh, I would want to know from your observations, what are some of the bands that have really piqued your interest, given the sort of growth that industry has had all these years. But as a member of the band, who are some of the people in this particular realm of rock and beyond, who have really sort of piqued your interest as well as the group's interest as well?
So, one really nice band I've heard is a band called Easy Wanderlings from Pune. And
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pratika, I forget the guy's name. They're going to be guesting with us on this concert.
Right,
So, they're a bright spark as far as I'm concerned in
right.
the landscape.
Okay.
I'm very happy to see, I mean, just not pertaining to your question, but
Uh,
1380 from Cochin is going to
mm,
be a band that's coming back after a long time to play at Iron.
right.
We played together for the first time in 19, gosh, what would it be? About probably 86 or 85 or something like that
Oh,
in Calcutta. Uh,
okay.
and we were on a tour together. I think we played Guwahati and Kolkata. And they were a very lovely bunch of guys, very quiet, sitting
Mm,
in one corner and chatting with themselves. And I kept thinking, like, what are these guys going to? I mean, rock
mm,
band. They didn't really look like they were rock band,
mm.
but they got on stage, and my God, they just, I mean, they blew
Right,
everyone away. And for me, they've always been the best Indian rock band I've ever heard.
right. Yeah.
Absolutely, no question of that. So I'm very happy to
Mm,
see them coming back. It'd be great
okay.
to catch up
Yes.
with
They'll be
them.
performing together. Yes.
And
Um,
yeah, and
right.
some of the other, some nice bands from the Northeast, a couple of nice
Mm,
bands from Bangalore. Warren's band, Blackstrap Blues,
mm.
great band, lovely instrumental stuff. Yes, there's a lot of good talent all around the place.
Yeah. Right. So it's my next question is sort of a throwback to what you just said a while back. You know how bands are sort of adopting, artists are sort of adopting to making original music, right? You said that that's a growth that you really like, seeing in Indian bands right now. So I would want to know from your side how, like, what are the challenges that one might have faced, of course, beyond the audience sort of consumption that there, but as a band itself, what goes on through a band's mind, or a group's mind, when together they sit down and they say, okay, this is what we want to make, this is what the people want, this is what our identity is. So before this original music from indie bands has sort of become a trend and blowing up right now, which is good for the scene. But what are the challenges Indus Creed as a band faced when they came together, and how has that sort of translated into the music now that you all play live, and the energy that comes through during any jamming session or any performance?
So you're talking about the challenges we faced back in the 80s, 90s
Yes, yeah,
versus today's
that compared to what people
Oh my
face
God,
now.
it's a whole different scene altogether. See, you got
Right.
to realize in the 80s, 90s, first of all, there was not a single music store here that you could go to and buy any quality
Hmm.
instrument because these instruments were not allowed into India. There was a 300% government customs import duty, which made it just phenomenally expensive.
Okay.
Plus, add to the fact that you were earning in rupees but buying in dollars, right? So,
Got
yeah, I mean, I remember like in the 80s, my keyboard, the DX7 used to cost 2000 USD. 2000
Hmm.
USD in those days, maybe the dollars were about like 25, 30 bucks or something. So that
Hmm.
was like, 60,000 bucks. And then,
Hmm.
so 60,000 rupees is a lot of money in the 1980s. Then you brought it, you went abroad, you paid for your airfare, whatever, stay, hotel, khana, pina. And then you came back and 300% duty, man, a lakh and 80,000 bucks on it. It's crazy. Who could
Got
afford that? So, I mean, the quality of gear was horrible. It was, I mean,
Hmm.
everything was either like got in through some back door, some channel, some guy smuggling something in, whatever it was.
Okay.
So, and let's face it, I mean, talent, no, you need, at the end of the day, you need quality instruments to perform and play,
Hmm.
I mean, to put out your stuff. So, thankfully, that has changed. And, it's so funny. It's swung in such a beautiful way to the other side. Like, for example, just to give you an example, the first actual really good keyboard I bought, I flew to
Hmm.
Hong Kong to buy it because there was no
Oh,
place I could buy
okay.
it here. So I actually went to Hong Kong and there was a store there. I was told, they said, go to this place called Tom Lee. And on Monday
Okay.
morning, I walked into this store, Tom Lee, and I walked into a room and there were 35 keyboards in that room. And I was like, my God, where have I come? This is like Nirvana, man.
Right.
I was there from 10 o'clock in the morning to 6 in the evening. At 6 o'clock, they said the store's closing. Please, you can leave now. And I came back on Tuesday and Wednesday and
Okay.
Thursday. And on Friday, they said, listen, man, are you going to buy anything or you just come here and hang for? You've been here 5 days for 8 hours. I said, no, no, I'm buying.
Right.
I bought my DX7, Yamaha DX7 at that
Hmm.
time, and I came back to
Right.
Bombay. So it was crazy. And today, we're blessed because every company is represented here. I can make one phone call and a dealer will send over a keyboard for trial to my studio, and I consider myself very, very blessed to be now in that situation, where one has such easy access to real quality gear.
Of course. Yeah.
That's a big thing. Second thing, so when you translate that into even PA and outdoors, today we have really international world-class sound vendors in the country. Playing a big gig, you get really top quality sound, lighting, if the budget permits. The sky's the limit, you know. So that's a big, big change for
Mm.
musicians all around. The other thing is, I suppose, the whole infrastructure and the the quality of travel. I mean, I've come back in a train with Mahesh and the guitar player Jayesh, where we were in the brake van, where the luggage is stored, and
Right.
we were sleeping on the floor of that van with dirty water and a whole bunch of vegetable potato sacks on the
Oh
side.
my God. Okay.
And finally, I was somewhere from Punjab, somewhere, I think Patiala to Delhi or something. And
Right.
and we had to bribe the TC every, stop to say, listen, please, man, we
Right.
go home. So, and at Delhi, finally, they just threw us out on the platform. And then we
Oh
spent
my God.
4 hours sleeping on a platform, and Mahesh's bag got stolen and all kinds of crazy
Oh my
stories.
God.
So,
Right.
yeah, so all that doesn't happen now. Now everybody's whizzing around the country. Flights and all are very common. Nobody goes by bus
Mm.
and train, I think, anymore. But from all these crazy stories and hardships also come the songs. They come there. If
Mm.
you're going to sit in one room, if I lock you up in a room for 6 months, and I tell you write music, this is a certain kind of music you'll write. But if I tell you
Mm.
go to Patiala and come back in a brake van with luggage and dog shit on the side, your song is going to be very different. So all these
Mm.
experiences, I think, add to your dimension, your
Of
writing,
course.
your everything. I mean,
Ah,
your songs are what you are, right? So,
of course, of course.
so,
Yeah.
so I think, in a way, it's kind of sad that the travel has become too easy now for maybe for the younger, not for me, for the younger generation. So
Right.
your stories get scripted from your songs get scripted from your life story. So depending on what you've gone through is what you're going to write. But
Mm-hmm.
having said that, yeah, I mean, you can fictionalize and write good stuff, interesting stuff. And I see a lot of good original stuff coming. It's very positive.
Right. So, speaking of music coming from people's lives, I would want to know if there is any more original pieces coming from Indus Creed anytime soon.
Oh, yeah, see, there's plenty of original ideas floating around. I mean, we've
Okay.
been working on a new album for the last, I think,
Okay.
7 or 8 years.
Okay.
But like I said, we're very lazy guys, man.
Right.
We'll
Right.
write
Right.
some stuff and say, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
this is it. Now let's do this, let's do that. And then we go home and forget. And then when we get it back and say, okay, it wasn't really that great. Let's try and do something else, whatever.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, yeah, I hope there'll be something that'll come out, but I can't really say that something's round the corner.
Yes.
Also, now Uday's moved to Goa. I
Okay.
stay in South Bombay. Mahesh stays in Borivali. So
Mm-hmm.
geographically, we're a little kind of split up. Now, that's not much
Mm-hmm.
of an excuse with the net today and all. You can
Mm-hmm.
still write songs, float them around, whatever. So I think it'll kind of happen when it's meant to happen. But
Okay.
in the meanwhile, we're playing. The gigs are on. We're playing IROC next in 2 weeks,
Yes.
3 weeks from now. Post that, we have some other gigs in the Northeast. We have some gigs in Goa. So yeah, but IROC is a big one for us, and we're really looking
Right.
forward to
Of
that.
course. Right. Okay, Zubin sir, thank you so much for joining the chat with Indulge. We've had a very good idea of what we have in store, what you have in store, and what we can look forward to. So, thank you so much for joining a conversation with
Thanks,
Indulge.
Pranav. It was lovely
Thank
talking
you
to
so
you.
much.